not be published. You can guess, but the actual numbers should not, are classified. I'm sure they're secret, maybe even top secret, and they should not be published. Okay? Now, the Tomahawk missiles, the USS Georgia, I think it was, the Ohio SS, guided missile submarine. There's 4 of them. The Ohio, the Michigan, the Florida, and the Georgia. 2 in the Atlantic, 2 in the Pacific. One of those submarines carries, I think it's 152. That's been published. 152, 153 missiles. So that gives, and I'll guarantee you, I think it was the Georgia, but there was at least one Ohio class submarine that was clearly contributing a massive amount of Tomahawk missiles to the initial attacks on Iran. Okay? Now, the Air Force bombers carry Tomahawk cruise missiles, and certainly we've seen countless images of surface ships firing the Tomahawk missiles. A surface ship, I don't know the exact numbers, and you can find it out in Jane's fighting ship, so it's not classified, but 153 plus missiles on one submarine, and you're talking 25 or 30 maybe on a destroyer. If you've got 5 destroyers in a full battle group, then you're talking maybe 100 missiles that would be available from that battle group in terms of Tomahawk missiles. So the Tomahawk missile inventory is something that needs to be carefully examined, and the only way to do it reasonably and rationally is in a classified setting. And for the press to be, and people will leak the discussions in those classified sessions. And that, if they leak the numbers, that is classified information and against the law. If they leak the fact that General A and Admiral B got into a fight over it, whether that's classified or not, I don't know. It just feeds the frenzy of political discussion. Now let's talk about another shortage. This one was reported, leaked, and I think it's true, but I'm not sure. There's a general, I believe it's the Army general responsible for all the troops in Europe. And he has a defense commitment to have long-term protection over defensive missiles in that theater. And the ships need it in order to be able to launch those missiles from either the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, or the Baltic. He got into a tizzy, evidently, because they weren't going to give him a guided missile destroyer that he absolutely felt he had to have. And without a guided missile destroyer, he would not be able to maintain whatever commitment he had made to NATO. And he sent a communication to somewhere within the government bitterly complaining about the fact that he wanted, it was a food fight. It's a food fight between fighting the war in Iran and continuing to protect people in the Atlantic and the Pacific who are not so engaged in that fight. Food fights like that go on all the time. How about between Montgomery and Patton in Operation Market Garden, where Montgomery got all the goodies in order to launch his attack to the north, and took away fuel and ammunition from Patton and slowed him down. That was a hell of a fight that went on during World War II. So those kinds of food fights are to be expected. But is the United States critically short of both offensive and defensive missiles? I don't know, because I don't know the numbers. It would be logical to think that certainly we have to draw down the inventories in the Pacific and the Atlantic in order to keep the numbers up so that we can continue to protect particularly the Gulf states and the U.S. troops. You've got to protect the battle group. You got to have enough defensive missiles to protect 2 carrier battle groups that are out there. You got to have enough defensive missiles to protect Jordan, the Gulf, South, all of those places. And obviously, we're not giving enough to Zelensky because he says he's out. He's complete. That's part of the food fight that's going on. All that is great information to have, but how you make a justified, critical, strategic decision, trying to do so in the general public, is pretty ridiculous and pretty laughable. I think we've got a problem with some ammunition, and Trump says we got enough. We probably have enough 500 and 2,000 pound bombs to blow up Russia. I mean, the conventional bombs. We have enough bombers. We have enough ships. We have enough submarines, and we have enough of the normal supply of what the bullets that we've had for years, the quantities of bullets to put into rifles and machine guns and all that other kind, 5-inch artillery shells off of destroyers. We probably have more than that than we need. But in critical areas, yes, I think we probably have a big problem. I've talked way too long, but I've tried to give you. Oh, the other thing, the whole nuclear thing, the nuclear argument is completely separate. It has a different force. The space assets to support both Iran and Taiwan and a nuclear deterrence, those are arguments that are entirely different from the conventional discussions that I've been trying to explain here. I hope I haven't talked too long and bored you to death.
For sure we're not bored, and for sure you haven't talked too long, and if you don't mind, I'm going to allow you to stay on the stage in case you have further commentary or people might have a question or two for you. I do want to point out something that neither you or I mentioned, and there has been some public discussion, obviously, on the Hill about all of this. For example, Senator Kelly has explicitly argued that the massive scale of regional airstrikes has been putting a severe strain on the available weapon supplies. So it's not as if this is in a, it's not as if there hasn't been, both in terms of some of the analyses by some of the strategic think tanks and some of the discussion that's public on the Hill. It's not as if this should come as a surprise to anyone. To the degree to which it puts us at risk, that's obviously debatable. But presuming once again that the Washington Post reporting is accurate, how is it possible the president didn't know this?
No, the president knew it. He'd been told. I mean, the president knows that the argument is out there. And I don't think the president himself knows exactly how many patriots we have. He may know that exact number. He certainly should be able to get it. I could write it on somebody could put it on a Post-it note and give him the number. How many we need? Now that's arguable. What's the burn rate? How many do we shoot per day versus how many can we resupply? Those numbers are way out of balance, I'm sure. But what the details are, I don't know. And there's one other point that I didn't make. Supposedly, and this makes sense, though I don't know whether it's true or not, supposedly Trump backed down on this is going to be bigger than World War II. What was it last weekend that he was talking about that new major strike? And the reason he yet again tacoed or said, no, we're not going to do it, is because Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states said, we don't have enough defensive missile capabilities, and they're going to start blowing up our oil refineries and our own infrastructure, and you can't hit them hard on their utilities, their basic civilian infrastructure, because we don't have enough missiles to knock down the incoming. And Trump backed down from that strike reportedly because the Gulf states made that position very strongly to him.
Well, adding some credibility to that speculation is the fact that last night, or maybe early this morning, our time, certainly today, Iranian time, the Iranians issued a statement that they are contemplating doing just that, hitting the Gulf states oil, and come on.
Well, they said they've already started doing it, onesies and twosies, and they're threatening to do their own, quote, massive strike. Whether they have the capability to do that, I don't know. But they've been saying they're going to do that, so that's not a surprise.
Also, we have to take into consideration they're very adept at drone warfare, and you can't stop them all, and it's not expensive relatively, as compared to a cruise missile, for example, to send a bunch of drones over. So I don't know what Saudi Arabia or Qatar's or any of the other Gulf states, Kuwait's defenses look like with regard to a drone attack that might come from Iran. But I think it's something that keeps their generals up at night concerned.
It keeps CENTCOM himself up at night concerned about it. Can you imagine the political damage if one drone hit the flight deck of one aircraft carrier? I mean, it would be a pinprick. They'd put the fire out in a military minute, and they'd have planes taking off on the flight deck within a couple of hours probably. But can you imagine the politics of a drone from Iran striking a major combatant vessel, a guided missile cruiser or an aircraft carrier in the midst of this war? The politics of that image would be unbelievable.
I mean, the USS Cole all over again.
There you go. There you go.
Well, the thing is, it would even be worse than the USS Cole, in my opinion. And I'm sure the pressure on these, some of them very young sailors who are on watch, is just got to be immense.
Oh no! Come on! Now wait a minute. That's why sailors are trained. That's why sailors for years have been going on 6 and 9 months deployments. That's why submarines stay submerged for 80 days at a time. That kind of stress and that kind of intensity is what the United States Navy trains for day in and day out during peace or by war. And we've got the best trained Navy in the world to be able to do that.
I've never understood. Someday I'd love to have an explanation on here, of course, of how they, because you're the expert on this, on how they are able to listen to pings submerged and analyze what they're listening to. That's unbelievable to me. What a talent that must take. Thank you, Anson. We'll now go to Alan, followed by Scott.
Hi everyone, thanks. I don't have not at all knowledge about all this, but thanks Anson for all the information he put in, and I learned a lot, but I think overall we not American. We think we are, and they picture it for us. There are many lack, and I'm worried about the enemy within. Back to you, sir.
Thank you, Alan. I think you expressed all of our thoughts. We'll go to Scott, followed by Ellen Normal.
Okay, there we go. Found my button. Yeah, I mean, are we at risk? I don't think we're defenseless, right? I mean, I'm sorry I missed so much of the conversation already. I'm sure Anson said a lot of helpful things. I'm glad he's on the stage. So yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, a risk is for what, right? I mean, I think. Look, I mean, this conflict with Iran, which I think is probably going to not end anytime in the immediate future. I mean, it doesn't seem so. I mean, well, who knows? I mean, with the president, who knows? But look, it's reduced the inventories of certain high-end precision weapons and stuff like that, apparently. So I think that I would guess the concern is that if we had to respond quickly to another major conflict, right, with let's say China did something in the Indo-Pacific Ocean, or there was some large crisis in Europe. I don't know, Putin got whatever. Whatever the scenario was, that maybe that would be the problem, right? That might create reduced deterrence. I don't know that adversaries may perceive us as having diminished stockpiles.
Hey, Scott, let me just throw in. Many people will argue that we didn't have enough of that kind of ammunition to deter China without doing anything with Iran.
Maybe
a long-term argument going on, and Iran just exacerbates it.
Wow, thanks, Anson. Thanks again. Glad you're on the stage, buddy. We might have less flexibility because we got to ration stuff out because of the shortage. I mean, industrial strain. You think about that. Like, how long does it take to manufacture weapons and replace the stockpiles? But look, we still are spending now. I think with the increases, more than like most of the countries in the world combined, right? We were spending more. I think we're the top of the top 25, and we spent more than 2 to 25 combined. I think that's increasing. Like, we've got a powerful nuclear deterrent. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure. I don't know. Again, I think certainly we're still the most powerful military in the world, but we probably have fewer options, right? I mean, if we needed to use the military other places, if other crises developed, that might be a problem. But I don't think. I don't imagine we're going to completely run out of munitions. But it's a strain, right? Like, resources aren't infinite, right? So I don't have much else intelligent to say, but I'm sure it's a concern, right?
Thank you, Scott.
I'll interject to what Scott's concerns are with this kind of question that I would love for think tanks to engage in. If we only had to conduct a war against Iran and protect the Middle East, only that, China, Russia, Latin America, we didn't have to worry at all about that. Would we still have enough of the kind of ammunition that we're using at high rates just in order to conduct that war against Iran until a reasonable goal of a drastic change in the regime took place? And my inclination is to think we don't even have enough to fight the Iran war by itself with some of those high-end munitions.
And that observation can lead one to speculate that this was a major factor in decisions by previous administrations not to do what this president has attempted to do with regard to Iran, to the frustration of many who find Iran to be such a pariah, because the realization that perhaps you can't do it without putting boots on the ground based on the amount of munitions available may have tempered the diplomatic approach toward Iran in the past. And for those who have been so highly critical of the JCPOA, if you factor that into it, that possibility, into the thought process by the Obama administration, maybe we have a greater understanding of why he went that route rather than what ultimately must be done. I think we all agree, and that is regime change in Iran because of the threat that they pose. But do we have the will to do it full force like we did in World War II? I don't think so. And I don't think anybody would argue that I'm wrong about that. And therein lies the real underlying problem, perhaps. El Normal, followed by Amir.
Good afternoon, Clubhouse, Gary's Critical Thinking Forum. I checked a very important fact, Gary, and that is, what was it that the president called treason in his truce? And
you mean today and yesterday?
yeah.
By the way, Gary, I'm very
understand.
happy that Norm is using the proper terminology. Truths, Gary. You always say posts. They're called truths, Gary. Truths.
Well, for obvious reasons, I don't use that terminology because, he doesn't call them lies, but sometimes they are. But at any rate, from my interpretation of what he wrote, he's finding the treasonous, not the release of information about our stockpiles, but that it was reported. He's specifically taking aim at the Washington Compost, as he calls it now. And the story that upset him was that he and Hegseth crossed swords over the issue of weapons, and the reporting was specifically by the Washington Post that the president of Camp David was pissed at Hegseth for not telling him. Why am I first hearing about this now, that the munitions are getting to a critically low stage? So I think that's a direct answer to your question.
Yeah, and I checked it, and it's incorrect. No offense, Gary.
It's incorrect. You're gonna. Yeah. I read the post to the. I don't know if you were here at that point, but I read the post during my opening salvo.
All right.
I think I understand English. What have I misinterpreted from those posts?
So at 12:34 a.m., the U.S. has massive amounts of munitions, especially of certain types. Additionally, large amounts are being manufactured and shipped to the U.S. as needed. Defense companies are building the largest number of plants and factories in our country's history. The, quote, leakers of these treasonous statements are being hunted down. Long-term jail sentences will be sought.
So where do you get from that the leakers of the treasonous statements, you're suggesting it has nothing to do with the Washington Post story, and that it has to do with the things that were leaked long before?
No, I'm suggesting that, as the Post says, that it has to do with the quantity of munitions that we have, which, as Captain Hansen correctly points out, would be treasonous if leaked. My only conclusion is that some people will go to any length to make a failure of this president, even jeopardize a war in which we are engaged. I've seen the same thing in other countries. It is really, really deplorable and repulsive. It's clear from that.
Now you are assigning motivation to the people who leaked information that you believe to be treasonous. Yes. And I don't know that you're in a position to assign motivation. It could be that they are concerned that the munitions are getting so low that they cannot protect the nation as they have been sworn to do, and they feel that they're being patriots by leaking the information. Now, I'm not saying it's correct that they leak the information, but you're presuming that they're doing so because they hate their commander-in-chief. Well, we don't know that that's the case, do we?
It's not news that people hate the president and hate the war. And it's not news,
but you are assigning motive
to
people without, you don't even know who the people are.
That's correct.
So you have no way of knowing what their motivation is.
So we'll divide my response into two. I agree with Captain Anson that it's treasonous to try to release to the enemy the amount of munitions that we have left. It's classified and possibly top secret. So we're all on the same page with that. The second thing is, what is the motivation? Now, that is speculative, no question about it. However, it's consistent with attempts to stop the war and undermine the president and make him into a failure, even at the cost of victory in the war that we are now engaged in. or at least heard it. Let me go on to something else. I think we're on the same page, Gary. It's just I broke it up into two. He doesn't reference the fight. In fact, subsequently, now of course he may be bullpuckying. He says he's fine with Hegseth. Everything is great with Hegseth. I'm also seeing
So let's just help people understand your point.
Okay.
Okay. So prior to this alleged scuffle verbal between the president and the defense secretary, I hope I'm not offending anybody by calling him the defense secretary, not the war secretary. But that's the official title no matter what the president says. So I will go with defense. I'm not trying to make a political statement. I'm just trying to be accurate. Prior to all of this, it is true that the Washington Post and Reuters in particular detailed, as we have discussed here on this stage, just how heavily the 5-month conflict with Iran has drained the Pentagon's top-tier rocket and missile inventories. You're suggesting that the president is arguing, and he didn't say that specifically, but okay, maybe he is, that the reporting that the United States has fired, for example, I'm looking up the figures now. Prior to all of this, it was reported that the United States has fired 1,300 tactical ballistic missiles since February. And that includes virtually all of the Army's initial global stockpiles of Army tactical missile systems and precision strike missiles. As Anson pointed out, it has been previously reported that the Navy has launched more than 850 Tomahawk cruise missiles. And it has previously been reported that the U.S. forces have expended more than 1,000 high-end interceptors, burning through massive chunks of available Patriot and THAAD thermal high-altitude area defense systems in order to protect coalition assets. So let me try to understand your point. You are saying that your interpretation is that the president finds these previous reports treasonous, not the reports themselves, but those who leak that information to the media to be treasonous. And secondarily, I'm curious, do you agree with the president that this reporting that I just articulated, based on some very quick researching that I just did on the fly, was treasonous?
So, if you publicly announce our depletion of missiles, that aids the enemy, and I'm agreeing with Captain Anson that it's treasonous. It is classified and shouldn't be leaked. And I can only see that if patriotism was their point, obviously it should be handled privately so as not to jeopardize our defenses, our military.
Okay.
Go
ahead, James.
One quick point.
Yeah.
I said that leakage of that kind of information is illegal because it is illegally releasing the numbers involved in classified information. I did not say it was treasonous because I'm not a lawyer, and I posited a situation where if it had been done in World War II, it probably would have resulted in execution due to treason. But I'm not a lawyer and I cannot make a distinction as to whether it's treasonous or not. But if they're banding around actual numbers and inventories and what we've shot and how fast we make them, those numbers are classified information, and publication or leakage of that information is against the law.
And I also find it interesting. I understand your position, and you may be correct, Norm, but the juxtaposition of his latest Truth Social postings on this matter following the reporting of his argument that allegedly occurred at Camp David with Hegseth, and not following the release of this information weeks ago, makes me conclude that the Truth Social postings are less about what was leaked, as you suggest, and more about him being embarrassed by the reporting of the Washington Post, or if not embarrassed, pissed off that the Washington Post is reporting something that didn't occur.
I, somebody's leaking, Gary, and it's endangering our fighting men and women.
I
And
agree
I
with
think
that
it-
100%.
And I think it is despicable. Now,
I agree
it's
with
some-
that 100%.
Right, and I agree with that too. I'm just suggesting that it's suspicious that he took the opportunity to point this out without specificity, without saying that this is what he's talking about when he uses the term treasonous, immediately following the White House and Pentagon reaction to the Washington Post story, specifically about him and Hegseth. And in at least one of these two postings, he specifically calls out the Washington Post. So I guess there are probably people who would agree with you that he's talking about one thing, but I personally come to the conclusion that he's talking about something else. But again, I could be wrong, and when he's questioned in his numerous gaggles, they'll have plenty of opportunity to get clarification on this issue.
At minimum, he's referring to both. Now, I don't know who's leaking about an argument at Camp David. That's an interesting question in and of itself. That's like gossip. But in this post that I just read you, there's no mention of the argument with Hegseth. It's strictly about the quantity of munitions and the production.
Right,
thereof.
but that was followed by his latest True Social posting saying how great a guy Hegseth is, and it's fake news that there was an argument between him and Hegseth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think if you put it in context, and if you look at the timeline, I guess reasonable people could reach the conclusion that you reached, but I think reasonable people could also reach the conclusion that I did. So we should move on.
All right.
Are you done?
Well, yeah, you wanted to move on. I mean,
Well, no, I thought I was going to let you move on to your next point, but
well,
okay.
well, that's very sweet. All I want to say is that this is true in Israel as well, that within the defense establishment in Israel, there are people who really disagree with the way Bibi is prosecuting the war, and they have actually attempted to undermine his prosecution of the various wars that Israel's involved in, from Hezbollah and Hamas to Iran. They're undermining him. And I see a parallel here with forces in Washington that are very negative about the president, and they're very negative about the war, and they want to undermine him. And they're just our mainstream media, for whom you and I have worked, do work, from the Times and the Washington Post to, you mentioned a few, I don't know, Axios and Politico. They have it in for the president. They want to make him into a failure, and particularly around this war as we go into the midterm elections in the fall. So I don't think it's a stretch to conclude that leaking it has a political agenda.
Oh boy. Once again, you speak to motivations for which we do not have facts. People can conclude it, and you're not the only one who concludes this, of course. The president being the number one who says that the media is out to get him. But on the other hand, he loves the media. Sometimes, as you know, as a purveyor of news yourself, it's not about trying to bring down the president. It's because there's a good story that's been presented to you. It's interesting. I'm right now engaged in, and I'm about to disengage the individual on my Facebook, with someone who believes that because I am posting on my Facebook pronouncements by the president, that means I am carrying the water of the right wing of this country.
Right.
Okay, which is bullshit. I'm not reporting these things because I'm out supporting the president. And when I report things that are critical of the president, I'm not reporting them because I'm trying to bring the president down. I'm reporting it because, in my judgment, after decades at this business, I'm pretty darn good, as you are as well. We're the same, generation. We could spot a good story when we see one. I don't give a damn, frankly, whether a president is a Republican or a Democrat, whether it's Trump or Biden. I look for the story. And, you mentioned Axios in particular. Interesting, given that one of his favorite reporters right now is an Axios reporter who he calls up all the damn time. He just calls them. It's not like the reporter calls the press office and says, I want an interview with the president. All of a sudden, the reporter's phone rings, and there's the president talking to him about these very issues.
And he's planting stories, Gary, I'm sure.
So if I were the president of the United States and I thought Axios was out to get me, why would I be giving them all these exclusive stories? He gives them exclusive stories left, right, and center. Nah, I think it's just that they have a good nose for news. And I think Axios in particular is a pretty good news organization. I don't know where the hell they came from, but all of a sudden they were there and they were on my radar, and I was enjoying reading what they have to report. So I don't think we can necessarily. Are there reporters who have it in for the president and they're looking for a gotcha? Yes, of course. Would they be as hard on a Biden or an Obama? Maybe not. I don't know. But I don't think you could just be dismissive of the story. If the story is inaccurate, that's one thing. If it's accurate, that's another. If I guess if I'm an editor and I get a call from 2 high-level individuals or 3, because I want 3 sources at the Pentagon, and they want to meet me in a
parking garage.
Parking garage in Washington, D.C., and give me information. Gary, you got to report on this. People listen to you. The Critical Thinking Forum is the premier place that people go to make up their minds about things, more so than any other outlet in the country. That's why we chose you. And you need to know that we are in danger because of these munitions. And it's our patriotic duty, we believe, to give you this story. All right, I guess I have to make a decision then, not about the legality of publishing it, but whether it's morally and ethically correct to publish it. And I'm sure I would have to have lots of discussions with lots of people before deciding to publish the information. But I guarantee you, if I did publish the information, it would be, right, I finally got the crap on Trump because I'm out to get Trump. You got to be careful about reaching conclusions, in my opinion, when facts are not in evidence.
Fair enough. And believe me, I'm a big fan of Ellsberg, whose leak helped to end the Vietnam War. And I'm a big fan of Mark Felt, who was Deep Throat in the Watergate conspiracy that Bernstein and Woodward reported on.
It's a really tough road to navigate. It really is. It's a tough road to navigate for the news sources who struggle about whether or not to go public with the information. And it's a tough road to follow when it comes to the news organizations. Do I publish it? What portions of this do I publish? What portions do I not? I'm sure you've been in a position, I certainly have, and I presume you have as well, when people I've had people come to me with information, great stories, and I've said, listen, this is an amazing story and I'd love to publish it. But if I publish it, you know, I want you to know that that's putting you out there, and there may be repercussions to you. I've actually tried to talk people out of me doing a great story, because one of the things you're supposed to do as a journalist is do no harm. And publishing this story would do a lot of good, but to the source, it would do harm. And I've had them, I actually, in one case, the person said to me, I don't care, and if you don't publish it, I'm going to, broadcast it. If you don't broadcast it, I'm going to go to somebody else who will. And so I presented it to my editors. My editors said, whoa, this is really sensitive. It has to do with maligning, I'm not going to say who at this point. It doesn't matter. A beloved public figure. We better be spot on with this information. We're going to run it by the attorneys. And I thought, great. The attorneys are going to say, don't publish it. I was hoping the attorneys would say, don't publish it. The attorney said, yeah, go ahead and publish it. We published it. There was no repercussions to us, but my news source, because they figured out who it was, I never revealed, but it was pretty obvious that only a finite number of people would have had this information. Her life was turned absolutely upside down, exactly as I had predicted. So it's difficult when these decisions, opportunities are presented. And I think we just have to be a little cautious not to immediately jump to the conclusion, that it's all about the media ganging up on the president. I don't think that's the case necessarily.
Well, one last thought, since I think maybe we should do a room on this leakage thing too. It's very juicy, Gary. And a good friend of mine from the Seattle Times, Duff Wilson, moved to the New York Times later, reported on the Duke rape case, ruined a bunch of young men's lives, only to find out that it was a fake, that there wasn't a rape involved. It was a fake story, and of course it ruined his career. He previously reported on some corrupt judges in Washington State, and he called the judge the night before and said, this story's coming out tomorrow, just want to let you know. And Gary, trigger warning alert to everybody, plug your ears if you don't want to hear this, self-harm alert. Gary, this judge hung himself the day before the story came out. So these are very, very difficult decisions and big responsibilities. And as Captain Anson just said, if somebody had leaked this during World War II, that our munitions were depleted, it would be an offense that could be punished by execution. These are big deals we're discussing.
I agree, and I appreciate you raising the issue, actually, so we can have the discussion. We'll go to Amir, followed by Andre.
Good evening, Gary, and everyone in the room. So I'm going to assume that there is shortage in ammunition, as we've been discussing, such as Tomahawk missiles and so on, because they're used in their hundreds, obviously, and against swarms of drones and crews and ballistics and God knows what else. So let's assume that this is true, but I don't actually think that puts the US at risk. And I'll try to explain why. But there's a couple of, let's say, factors or events that's been happening recently. So one today, in fact, today we heard that the head of Supreme National Security Council in Iran, a guy called Zor Badr, is a massive hardliner. He has resigned, and the person who's replaced him is a veteran of Iran-Iraq war, a guy called Rezai. and he's not a heavyweight, such as Zulqadr, and that kind of indicates to me that the regime is serious about achieving a long-term peace agreement with the US. And that in itself is creating a breathing space. Now, we already know that Trump has given J.D. Vance, he's almost given him a free hand now to negotiate a comprehensive agreement with Iran. Now, this would definitely create a large enough window, in my view, to manufacture munitions that are short. There's a shortfall of Tomahawk missiles, for example. Now, if the US actually, if J.D. Vance manages to achieve the sort of agreement, which includes the nuclear material being extracted from Iran, the enrichment being stopped, and the regime's operations outside Iran is discontinued, if those three very specific things are achieved, then all well is good. It's all well and good, basically. The sanctions can be removed, and the Trump can claim total victory, I think. And I think it would be well deserved too. Now, remember, such a comprehensive agreement cannot possibly be accomplished before the midterm. And this is a very key date that we need to bear in mind for Trump and what could come after the midterm. Now, if you remember, the JCPOA, I think it took years to accomplish, to actually agree with all the details. An agreement that could cover the three items that I mentioned is not likely to finish within a couple of months. That is given. So, what is going to happen? If this is achieved, obviously Trump will claim victory. If it's not achieved, then in this particular time, Trump will have an easy ride between now and then. The oil prices will stabilize, for example. The Strait of Hormuz will be open for the duration, and the ammunition will be replenished. So those goals are basically, whichever way you look at it, is going to prove to you that US is not at risk, given the trajectory of where we are heading with this. Now, bear with me with this just for a bit longer, because there's other elements in this. The second element is Hamas is already out of the picture. And my guess is that between now and let's say the midterm, Hezbollah will also be contained. If not completely diminished, basically. It can never be completely disseminated, but it can be, in terms of its capabilities, what is happening between Israel and the Lebanese army, I think that's being diminished, basically, within the few months, let's say. Now, the proxies in Iraq are also being hammered by the Iraqi government with the backing of the US. So put all these together, Gary, and there is either going to be a comprehensive deal, which Trump will declare victory, or the midterm will be over and Trump will come back with a vengeance. And I think those are. I hope that makes sense, and I've managed to articulate it in the way that it's in my mind, and it's not too convoluted, basically. So those are my thoughts here.
Thank you, Amir, and I thought you were very clear in your presentation. I think I owe it. I want to go back just a second, very briefly, and owe it to the audience to explain a little something about information that makes it into the public domain and whether it's classified or not before we hear it. Because oftentimes it's not. For example, I quoted earlier reporting by several highly respected think tanks. Well, they use open source data, and then they publish general estimates of military readiness. So the specific internal metrics are not part of that equation. If specific internal metrics are leaked to the press, those would be protected under national security laws. So the exact, granular figures that would tell us how many specific weapons have been fired in combat that precise count that I referred to earlier, what did I say, 1,300 ballistic missiles and 850 Tomahawks? I think that's what I said. Along with the remaining numbers left in active military stockpiles, those exact logs are under strict operational security, as both Norm and Anson accurately pointed out, so that our adversaries do not know when we're approaching some kind of a weapons bottleneck. But public estimates are another thing. So I mentioned the Center for Strategic and International Studies specifically. They had long ago published unclassified baseline estimates regarding the stockpiles. They are obviously not internal. It's not like some general picked up the phone and leaked specifics. They are external projections. Where do they get this from? Well, it's public record, our defense budget allocations. It's public record what the Pentagon has purchased. And there's, we see the timelines of what is occurring in Iran. So some of this reporting, I'm not saying all of it, but some of this reporting is not necessarily treasonous leakage of information. Some of it may be. I don't know. I would have to go back and read the nuances on how each of these reports were written, because the terminology that is used by the news organizations will give you some insight as to whether or not this came directly from the Pentagon. They'll say things like 2 sources or 3 sources of the Pentagon who requested anonymity because they are not allowed to speak publicly about this issue, ... All right, that's one thing. But a lot of what we conclude, myself included, as accurate is really based on estimates by people who are well versed on reaching the conclusions that they do when they make their estimates. So I don't know whether anything treasonous occurred or not. I guess we'll find out. But let's also take into consideration that the president makes statements himself, oftentimes without facts and evidence, i.e., the reflecting pool was vandalized. And we're going to get those people and we're going to prosecute them. Well, just because he said it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It could be that there was some treasonous leakage, or if not treasonous, at least leakage that violates military codes of conduct or federal law. Could be. On the other hand, that's not necessarily the case. And I just present that to try to explain to the audience that it's nuanced. It's not necessarily something that we can reach conclusions about, at least not at this moment. Thank you, Amir. We'll go to Henry, followed by Agent.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. You got ahead of me there, because one of the points I wanted to make was the very one you just made. A lot of the information, especially from places like the Center for Security and International Studies, they just get that information from publicly released information from the Pentagon, because, like you said, they have to report these things because it's public money. It's your taxpayer money that goes into buying all of these things. So a lot of these things just come from legally obligated publications. So I think as far as those go, obviously it can't be treason to read public reports, can it? But the other points I wanted to make was this kind of depletion. For me, I'm just, as a layman, and especially a layman from, as you can probably tell by my voice, from abroad, it makes me think, what are the military planners doing? What kind of planning are they doing? Because, so for example, the Patriot missiles, they're estimated to have been reduced by 60%. I think that 60% takes into consideration last year as well, the whole 12-day war thing. I don't think that's just from this February. But regardless, it doesn't matter. 60% reduction. Now, I'm there thinking, okay, well, sure, that can't be a good thing, right? By anybody's estimations. I'm sure you don't have to be an expert or even somebody at all sort of with expertise in military matters to think 60% of a highly effective interceptor defense missile gone in one brief or two brief conflicts with the same adversary makes me think, okay, somebody didn't plan this right. And then you got to wonder, well, surely the people who should be able to plan this kind of thing are the people who have those military planner job titles, right? So that makes me really sort of just step back and think, wow, this sounds like a monumental cock-up. And then the other thought I had linked to that, and it's linked to that, is the money aspect. And one of the somebody who was on stage before, I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at my phone, so I can't remember the name of the person who spoke. He mentioned about how the US military budget is so much bigger than the sort of next number of countries. And it's always been this thing over the past few years, like the military budget.
Henry, you're thinking of Anson.
Yeah,
I thought it was me, but
Oh,
yeah, no, I think it was you. It
used to be the figure that I heard was that like we're number one in the top 25, but that we spend more than 2 through 25. But now I think we're approaching spending more than the rest of the world.
well, I mean, the number I always heard was 10. And I remember looking at one of these pie charts a couple of years ago, and it kind of listed the next sort of 10 or 11 countries after. I mean, I'm sure this thing can fluctuate. So at one point it might have been 25, and then it goes to 10, and then it goes to the top 30. Because once you get far enough down that list, you're talking about places that are spending the equivalent of maybe $1 billion or even a few hundred million a year, right? And that's what a tenth of an aircraft carrier. So I guess it could be that, right? At some points, but the point is well made. That the budget not this big expansionary budget that they're pushing through now. I don't know if that's been approved or not yet, but the budget as was is more than X number of countries, many combined. Most of those also being allied countries, right? Because in that top 10, the only two that are quote unquote adversaries would be Russia and China. Everybody else is ostensibly ally, right? And so I'm thinking again, you can hear it from my accent. I am from somewhere else. My taxes do not go into this. But I'm thinking, if my taxes were going into this every year, $800 billion, and now it's going to be $1.5 trillion, and these munitions can be so depleted so quickly. I'm just thinking, what the hell is the money being spent on? Right? And I know these things are expensive. I know the Tomahawks are like $2 million a piece, and they make like 100 a year, and they probably sign multi-year contracts. Then you've got your $12 billion aircraft carriers, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, I get it. Things are expensive, but at the same time, I'd be thinking, shit, $800 billion every single year of my taxpayer money is going to this, and to be left bare like this, I'd be pissed. I'd be pissed. I mean, it's not really.
So off the top of whatever initial number, you have to think about $250 billion, and that's the VA budget. So if it's $880 billion, then it's really $250 billion off the top of that gets you at like 500 or 600, and then 500 or 600 go for paying for force structure. Salaries, research and development, rearm, refit, for a U.S. fleet of 386 surface vessels. Just over,
Marshall, I get
the
it.
land,
Yeah,
the land master's over the
100%.
size of about $1 million, something like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. Shit's expensive. I get it. I'm just thinking sort of from a purely sort of layman taxpayer's perspective. I just wonder how many other people have that sort of first initial gut reactions, like, how is this possible? But obviously, I get it. You know,
So
the numbers are what they
I
are.
forgot
Right?
to ask you a
Assuming no
very
fraud.
pertinent. I forgot to ask you a very pertinent question. You being Britanol, will you take the empire back? We've had our fun. It was great. Pax Americana. We're going out on top. You know, why don't the British just, Churchill gave it to us. Why can't we just give it back?
Make America Great Britain again. I mean, it could be. You might have a point there, right? But I guess the last thing I wanted to say was it's more of a question, and it's back to what Anson was saying before. And again, it's to do with the sort of it's linked to the money thing. And Anson, you were mentioning before that like a peer-to-peer. America, basically, from what I understood from what you were saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're basically saying that America couldn't fight a peer-to-peer war based on their current resources. And peer-to-peer, I guess that would be one of China or Russia, right? And then Russia spent, I can't remember the last I checked, it was like, I know since Ukraine it's changed because Russia's economy has essentially almost become a war economy. But even before Ukraine, I think Russia was spending, I think it was like $100 and something billion equivalent on their military every year. And China, I guess, is probably a lot more, but even still, it's probably like 300 billion or whatever. Probably, I think it was like half of what the USA's was. So why could, in your estimation, why could America not fight a peer-to-peer, or not do and I'm sort of trying to answer my question instinctively first, and tell me if my answer's wrong. And if my answer's wrong, tell me what the right answer is. My initial answer is I'm thinking, well, you've got 700 bases around the world, maybe just do stretched. If you didn't have those bases, etc., maybe you could do it. If that's the answer, then great. If that's not the answer, please tell me and tell me what the answer is. But my question is, why is it that if America's spending $800 billion a year, every year on its military, and again, let's account for what Marshall said, taking out for the veterans budget. But America's spending so much more than the quote unquote peers. Why is it that they wouldn't be able to fight a peer-to-peer war?
So
Right, the person who made that point is not here any longer.
Oh, is he gone? Okay, no problem. That's all right. No sweat.
Thank you, Henry. We'll go to Agent followed by Righty.
I got it. I got to my mic here. Thank you for having me, Gary. I think I've made a similar point maybe in the past week or so that in a lot of ways, the whole purpose of the U.S., one of the main things is war and empire. I think they do it better than anybody, and they exercise the ability to go to war, more than anyone. I think it's still the case. The U.S. spends more on military than the rest of the world combined, and you're talking about 5% of the world population. For sure, a lot of the money is spent inefficiently, but I would presume that that's the case in most countries. I think this whole thing of depleted stockpiles could be true, but my gut, naive sense of it is, if it's an issue, it's something that can easily be worked around. There's many, many ways to blow things up. To the point about
to your point.
With what industrial?
To your point, it could be that the stockpiles are not as depleted as is being reported, but there are those who have interests in seeing the industrial military complex even expand further, who may be sounding an alarm in order to ingratiate themselves with somebody. I don't know if that's the case. I'm not alleging it, but I that's possible too.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good instinct around it. You know, when Trump came into office, I think the first time he was like, remember he would use I think he used the term about two different things. He said the cupboards were bare, you know, like Obama left us, you know, with nothing, both about weapons and then later about PPE when you know, even though it's 3 whole years after Obama left office, it was like, the cupboards were bare and they just left us with a binder, a plan for the pandemic rather than actual readiness. And it's like, bro, you had 3 years in office prior to like figure that out. But anyway, it's not really worth debating facts with someone like Trump. He's a con artist. He's doing a confidence game, a persuasion game on everybody. And yes, he does.
Right. So you're actually expanding my thought to another realm. I know we are all into conspiracy theories lately, and maybe for good reason, because a lot of this stuff turns out to be true. But maybe the president's behind these leaks. Maybe maybe the government is purposely sending out misinformation. I'm not exactly sure I would understand the logic behind it, but who knows? I don't know. I mean, this is a president who, as a private citizen, would call into radio talk shows to talk about, you know, to pretend he was somebody else and talk about how great Donald Trump is. So, who knows
this is a guy,
what's going on?
He would call up the magazine, the tabloids, to make sure and like talk about his extramarital affairs and things like that to make sure that they would write about them.
Right, because he likes being. I've known people in my business. I've known a lot of people in my business. You know, I knew a politician who once said to me, "I don't care what they write about me as long as they print my name, spell my name right." You know, because it kept his name out in front of the voters. Because it was all about recognition, not about the content of the article. So who knows?
Exactly. He's told us, he's been telling us who he is for over 40, 50 years here, Gary. So it's like, you got to believe him at some point, and you got to think it's not like he's playing a different game now than he ever did.
Right, but I have to admonish you and me the way I admonished Norm with this caveat. We don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's fair. But I think the whole point of the cupboards were bare. It's always why does he say it? He's not someone to ever reveal weakness without a real purpose. So the purpose always was, I need Congress to sign off on, trillions of dollars or at least hundreds of billions in whatever I want them to fund next. So I'll strategically reveal weakness and say that it's their fault if they then don't do what I want, right? So I have to think that's the game that's being played. I think this whole, exactly, like, should never trust any leaks out of the White House. I mean, your first instinct should be that the president himself, ordered the leak.
Well, I remember when then Vice President Cheney was scheduled to be on the 3 or 4 Sunday morning television talk shows on the circuit, and how in the Sunday New York Times, the story was leaked, and I can't even remember what the story was, but the story was published, and it quoted an unnamed high administration source. And then he was called into, he was asked the same question, of course, about the story that just coincidentally appeared on the day that he was to appear on the television talk shows. And he said, "Come on, on matters of national security, I can neither confirm nor deny the information." Well, that's like almost confirming it. And so we got through that weekend, And it wasn't until, I don't know how long later, more than a year later, it came out that the high administration official who leaked the information, to which Cheney declined to comment on based on national security concerns, was Dick Cheney.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how the game is played.
That's exactly how the game is played.
It's not unique to Trump. This is how the game is played, and it's like playing three-card Monte or David Copperfield making the Statue of Liberty disappear before our very eyes. It's politicians. Many of them are flim-flam artists, and we are the audience. The difference is when we see David Copperfield do it, we go, "Oh wow, yay!" and we applaud. When we see Donald Trump do it, we start screaming and hollering at each other.
Exactly. I think I wanted to say also to the thing about, oh, why can't we have a peer like war or something? I think we certainly can. Peer to peer. I mean, that's not normally the context in which I'm used to that term, but a peer to peer war.
The United States could not fight a war with China.
Oh,
in the
God.
Eastern Pacific, expect to win, have ships knocked out, and expect those ships to be rebuilt in 6 months. It would take a year at the very least to rebuild the stuff. That's what they mean.
When was the last time we had a peer-to-peer war? When was the last time?
World War II.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You do not want to have peer-to-peer war between nuclear power. That's why we had the Cold War. That's why we have proxy wars. All right. It's not about who can win, because nobody can win a peer-to-peer war between nuclear
superpowers. Of course it can, as long as you use conventional powers and not nuclear powers. There's no guarantee that
It's
nuclear powers.
Like the India-China thing. Like, as long as you fight with clubs and sticks in the mountains, like, then you can have a war. It makes no sense. I mean, it's
I
absurd
just don't think there are as many people who want to press the nuclear button as you think so. In particular, among the settled world powers, China, Russia, the United States, Europe. None of those want to press the button very readily. And
we don't want to have a war because it just inevitably escalates.
That's who the peer-to-peer conflict would be with.
Exactly. Nobody wants it. Nobody wins. It's just like that movie.
Anson's point is not that we can't keep up a nuclear war. It's that we don't have the defense industrial base or the people to fight that kind of conflict, nor do we have the public support a 4 to 5 year conflict on war footing would require.
Right. It's an absurd, line of reasoning, I think. I will say about the Iran thing, I think we're being, even on the daily basis, these announcements, it sounds really sloppy for sure. Again, he's usually not talking to us. So I think with these things, when he's talking about war or things, he's talking more to the people he's negotiating with. So when he makes his public statements, but look, we haven't blown up the power plants. We've only blown up a few bridges so far. I think more as a symbolic, like this is how it's going to keep going if you want to keep playing. But the real thing is we're being incredibly restrained. Like, to actually open Hormuz properly, I was looking into it. There's millions of people within, let's say, I think it's a 10-kilometer distance from the strait and stuff. It's just like so many people are.
standard that we had before, yes. But in our minds, or the average person mind who's never even been on a military base before, they would think shortage and like, oh, we're gonna run out of ammunition anytime soon, which is not true.
But if open source intelligence is saying this, and you know that the President of the United States got into a fight with the Defense Secretary over this very issue, why would you think we have enough munitions?
Because they're trying to make aware of, well, they're trying to create awareness or bring along the people, inform the people about the, like, even with, I think you're talking about what happened when Trump was in office. And what they're trying to do is involve the people more and more and more into what's going on behind the scenes. That's always been make America great again. It's not just
So you're in the camp, righty, of believing that this is all nonsense that's being released, and that in reality there is no shortage.
Yeah, I think that there is not as much as there was before, specifically, but I don't think it's.
When was before? Before Trump?
Well, let's go back to the last war. Like, as compared to when we were mass producing it in-house, there's a shortage to there, yes, but to the amount of quantity. But once we started trying to make treaties with other nuclear powers, I mean, other things came into fact than just nuclear missiles. It was other factors. Oh, you got to take away, you got to decommission these amount of things. You got to have this, so because we're the ones bringing to the table, we had to also, be a part of it. We couldn't just amend it while them saying what they wanted from us also too, to even it out a little bit.
You don't believe that this war in Iran is quickly depleting certain munitions?
No. I think that we haven't even, like, we did do stuff, we did use, but we haven't been the majority in that war that has been doing most of the damage. It's always been Israel.
No, that's not true. That's actually not true. No, it's not true. It's actually been the United States more so than Israel.
It's not our fight, bro. It's not our
fight. That you can make that argument if you want, but that's not the discussion of the room. The discussion of the room is, are the munitions being depleted? And you may be right that they're not, but for sure the United States has depleted far more munitions than has Israel. Okay, Isaiah, followed by Smurf.
So, somewhat of what the guy was speaking about earlier, righty, I would say that readily available, as in they can be shipped off and immediately used, they're already calibrated or can be recalibrated. Those munitions, I would say, are probably, I would say, is a shortage. Readily available munitions, as in things that can just be launched, you don't have to prepare them. But as for the stockpile itself, that's where I'm a lot more skeptical on, because if that would be the case, I would assume the signs would be way too glaring for anyone to hide. It doesn't matter who puts in the effort. I think that would be way too obvious to anyone, and there would be a lot more signs to point to that. But I think readily available munitions, as in they can be used immediately and there's not really much need to be done besides calibration, I think that is in shortage. And that does put the United States, I guess, at a slower response time if something else does happen. But I don't believe we are running out of ammo, and if everyone bums rush America, we're going to be cooked. I don't think that's what's going on. There'd be way too many signs to show that's happening.
Mm-hmm. But in all fairness, that's not what Anson said. Anson said you couldn't fight a near-peer competitor with the depleted munitions stock that we have. In particular, if it's China, because you have to forward deploy across 6,000 miles. And you can't get across 6,000 miles in a matter of a couple of days. It's just not like, unless you're in a plane, it's just not possible.
Yeah, but
So-
but we're not specifically talking about Anson's observations, as important as they were.
No, I know, but I'm noting Yancey's observation specifically because not only did he think the stockpiles were short, he thought in his practical experience that it meant it would be hard to fight a near-peer competitor. And I think that's a very important observation.
Right, but I don't think Isaac was referring just to near-peer competitors. He's referring to the overall question of whether there's really a stockpile shortage. So I guess my question to Isaac would be a little different, and that would be then why would there be these reports that stockpiles are low?
I think that I'm not military. I'm not going to claim I am, but I was raised in a military state. So there's.
He was raised in a military
If I
state.
remember the correct classification, there is general stockpile, like what's kept in actual storage, what's actually stockpiled, more or less never touched, just documented, made. Then there's readily available, as in this can be taken right now, put on a plane, put on a ship, used, no issue. I think the available, as in what is immediately ready for use, is short. That's what I think a lot.
Right. I heard you say that, but I'm just curious how you reconcile your observations with the report.
Because if we were short on all of them, as in we actually were just losing missiles, losing everything.
Right, you think there would be greater indication of it, but the question I have is, then where is this reporting coming from? Are they just making it up out of thin air, in your opinion?
I think a lot of them might be misunderstanding what they're reading or what they're getting reports on. That's what I think it could be. Now, could there be a greater problem, as in we're actually low and it's just being hidden? That is a possibility, but more confirming evidence would actually be needed to say that. I'm not saying that's out of the question. It's just at the moment it looks like it just publicly, if I were to go look up things, it would seem more usable munitions are at a shortage rather than across the entire nation our actual stockpiles. I think a lot of these people are misreading what that actually entails, whether they've been in military or not. That's where I think the misunderstanding is coming from.
Thank you for that, Isaac. I'm going to move on because we only have 4 minutes left, and we have 3 more people on the stage. We'll go to Smurf, followed by Billy.
There is no shortage of munitions, and since you're short on time, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, Smurf, but you don't want to quantify that? Guess not. We'll go to Billy, followed by Noel.
So what's a threat is not the United States, but Taiwan. Since we don't have the weapons, how do we defend Taiwan? China wants it. Now is a great time for them to take it.
I think that even if we didn't have a perceived shortage of weapons, that would be a concern, to be honest with you, because we're so involved in this Iran conflict. It would be a good time. I think personally, the reason it's not happening is because of the trading partnership between the United States and China. Both nations benefit greatly from that partnership, and China does not want to upset that apple cart. I suspect that's the reason why they have been so constrained. I think China could take Taiwan almost as quickly as the United States claims to have taken Venezuela, and might very well take Cuba. Normal, you get the last word.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks. I didn't raise my hand to come up again, but I feel grateful for the invitation, and I'll give you a couple of words. And those are that I agree with you regarding Taiwan, that it is in China's interest to keep the peace there. They have a good relationship with Taiwan as long as we don't poke what's the animal that China stands for? The panda bear? As long as we don't poke the panda bear and make a big deal out of recognizing Taiwan as an independent country or anything, China's making lots of money with you. In fact, not only are they making lots of money, but we have freed them from a cycle of famine and created a middle class there with our wonderful consumer economy. And we've also created a wonderful economy in Taiwan by purchasing their chips. We're not the only people that are the marketplace or the customer of China and Taiwan, but we're the biggest ones by far. So I think this is this Iranian revolutionary, this Islamic genocide corps war is a demonstration to China that we're willing to use our munitions. They're not there to save. We're going to upgrade them. And I think we're showing the world that we're willing to defend the freedoms that we prize so greatly. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Norm. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock New York time. So until 5 o'clock New York time tomorrow, next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum. Everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
Tao Te Ching can be translated as the Book of the Imminence of the Way, or the Book of the Way and of How It Manifests Itself in the World, or simply the Book of the Way. Since it is already well known by its Chinese title, I have let that stand. About Lao Tzu, its author, there's practically nothing to be said. He may have been an older contemporary of Confucius, 551 to 479 BCE, and may have held the position of archive keeper in one of the petty kingdoms of the time. But all the information that has come down to us is highly suspect. Even the meaning of his name is uncertain. The most likely interpretations, the Old Master, or more picturesquely, the Old Boy. Like an Iroquois woodsman, he left no traces. All he left us is his book, the classic manual on the art of living, written in a style of gem-like lucidity, radiant with humor and grace, and large-heartedness and deep wisdom, one of the wonders of the world. People usually think of Lao Tzu as a hermit, a dropout from society, dwelling serenely in some mountain hut, unvisited except perhaps by the occasional traveler arriving from a 60s joke to ask, "What is the meaning of life?" But it's clear from his teachings that he deeply cared about society, if society means the welfare of one's fellow human beings. His book is, among other things, a treatise on the art of government, whether of a country or of a child. The misperception may arise from his insistence on wei wu wei, literally doing, not doing, which has been seen as passivity. Nothing could be further from the truth. A good athlete can enter a state of body awareness in which the right stroke or the right movement happens by itself, effortlessly, without any interference of the conscious will. This is a paradigm for non-action, the purest and most effective form of action. The game plays the game. The poem writes the poem. We can't tell the dancer from the dance. Less and less do you need to force things, until finally you arrive at non-action. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. Nothing is done because the doer has wholeheartedly vanished into the deed. The fuel has been completely transformed into flame. This nothing is in fact everything. It happens when we trust the intelligence of the universe in the same way that an athlete or a dancer trusts the superior intelligence of the body. Hence Lao Tzu's emphasis on softness. Softness means the opposite of rigidity and is synonymous with suppleness, adaptability, endurance. Anyone who has seen a Tai Chi or Aikido master doing not doing will know how powerful this softness is. Lao Tzu's central figure is a man or woman whose life is in perfect harmony with the way things are. This is not an idea, it is a reality. I have seen it. The master has mastered nature, not in the sense of conquering it, but of becoming it. In surrendering to the Tao, in giving up all concepts, judgments, and desires, her mind has grown naturally compassionate. She finds, deep in her own experience, the central truths of the art of living, which are paradoxical only on the surface, that the more truly solitary we are, the more compassionate we can be. The more we let go of what we love, the more present our love becomes. The clearer our insight into what is beyond good and evil, the more we can embody the good. Until finally she is able to say, in all humility, I am the Tao, the truth, the life. The teaching of the Tao Te Ching is moral in the deepest sense, unencumbered by any concept of sin. The master doesn't see evil as a force to resist, but simply as an opaqueness, a state of self-absorption, which is in disharmony with the universal process, so that, as with a dirty window, the light can't shine through. This freedom from moral categories allows him his great compassion for the wicked and the selfish. Thus, the master is available to all people and doesn't reject anyone. He is ready to use all situations and doesn't waste anything. This is called embodying the light. What is a good man but a bad man's teacher? What is a bad man but a good man's job? At least as often as he. The Chinese language doesn't make this kind of distinction. In English, we have to choose. But since we are all potentially the master, since the master is, essentially, us, I felt it would be untrue to present a male archetype, as other versions have ironically done. Ironically, because of all the great world religions, the teaching of Lao Tzu is by far the most female. Of course, you should feel free throughout the recording to substitute he for she, or vice versa. As to method, I work from Paul Carus's literal version, which provides English equivalents, often very quaint ones, alongside each of the Chinese ideograms. I also consulted dozens of translations into English, German, and French. But the most essential preparation for my work was a 14 years long course of Zen training, which brought me face to face with Lao Tzu and his true disciples and heirs, the early Chinese Zen masters. With great poetry, the freest translation is sometimes the most faithful. We must try its effect as an English poem, Dr. Johnson said. That is the way to judge of the merit of a translation. I have often been fairly literal, or as literal as one can be with such a subtle, kaleidoscopic book as the Tao Te Ching. But I have also paraphrased, expanded, contracted, interpreted, worked with the text, played with it, until it became embodied in a language that felt genuine to me. If I haven't always translated Lao Tzu's words, my intention has always been to translate his mind. Describing the indescribable, teaching the unteachable, pointing the way to the way. What does Lao Tzu think he is doing here? It can't be done. No way. Hence, Po Chu-yi, poet and stand-up comedian, wrote, "He who talks doesn't know, he who knows doesn't talk." That is what Lao Tzu told us in a book of 5,000 words. If he was the one who knew, how could he have been such a blabbermouth? That's the problem with spiritual teachers. They have to be blabbermouths. But their words are, in the traditional Buddhist metaphor, fingers pointing at the moon. If you watch the finger, you can't see the moon. How meticulous the great masters had to be. A monk asked Matsu, "Why do you teach mind is Buddha?" Matsu said, "To stop a baby from crying." The monk said, "When the crying has stopped, what then?" Matsu said, "Then I teach, not mind, not Buddha." The monk said, "How about someone who isn't attached to either?" Matsu said, "I would tell him, not beings." The monk said, "And what if you met a man unattached to all things? What would you tell him?" Matsu said, "I would just let him experience the great Tao." In fact, the truth is right before our eyes, right under our noses. So simple that every child understands it. And yet, as Bankei said, the farther you enter into it, the deeper it is. Where is the way to the way? What a question. Still, for complicated minds, drastic measures are needed. Lao Tzu's book was written as a response, out of grandmotherly kindness. According to the oldest biography, Lao Tzu lived for a long time in the country of Chu, but seeing its decline, he departed. When he reached the frontier, the guard said, "Since you are going away, sir, could you write a book to teach me the art of living?" Thereupon, Lao Tzu wrote his book about the Tao and departed. This is legend, but it is an accurate description of the way in which true teaching happens. He who knows doesn't talk, but words are no hindrance for him. He uses them as he would use gardening tools. When someone asks, he answers. Tao De Jing. 1. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness. The gateway to all understanding. 2. When people see some